and welcome to the Author Roundup, a special segment of the Book Connection Show where we meet up and coming indie authors and talk to them about their recently released books. This is the Author Roundup, and I'm your host, Jenny. Today, we're diving into a story that blurs the line between reality and fiction, where the high stakes world of medicine intersects with the dark undercurrent of narcotics, corporate negligence, and human fallout. This story draws from the real clinical experience, uncovering the dangers of burnout, the cracks in pharmaceutical oversight, and the deadly ripple effects of narcotic smuggling. It's a smart, suspenseful narrative, part truth, part fiction, and entirely absorbing. Our guest today spent over 3 decades in the operating room as a cardiac surgeon, witnessing both triumph and tragedy. Forced into retirement after losing his vision, he turned to writing as a new creative frontier. Now, with a lifetime of stories and a world of travel behind him, he brings us a powerful new novel. The author of Toxic Intent, please welcome Dr. Brian Hummel. Hi, Dr. Hummel. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Hi, Jenny. Thank you for having me.
Let's go right into the questions. So, what first inspired you to write Toxic Intent? And then, how did the idea evolve from concept to the actual novel?
Well, the inspiration came in that I love to read, or I always did when my eyesight was very good. I read just constantly.
Mhm.
And I had a minor in literature in college. So, someplace in the back of my mind, I wanted to write. I didn't know what. I'd written a lot of scientific articles and published research articles, but it wasn't writing. And then when I had this opportunity with really nothing in front of me to stop me, I sat down and said, okay, I need to tell stories. And frankly, the first book I wrote started off as a memoir and I got off direction, and it ended up being a compilation of stories and interesting people I had encountered through my life. So that I knew I could do better. It wasn't edited well. It wasn't, frankly, very well written. People liked it, but it wasn't what I wanted. And I had in the back of my mind to tell this story of my actual encounter with contaminated heparin, which is a drug, and the consequences of that. And then wrapping around things that I had encountered in the course of my 35 years as a cardiac surgeon. So that's how it all came together.
I see. So the desire to write has always been there. And it's good that you mentioned that some of these events are true events that actually happened. So the story blends medical realism with thriller elements. How did you balance fact and fiction?
It was more free flowing, to be honest. I started with the true fact of the contaminated heparin and the consequences that it involved. Unfortunately, loss of life here in the United States. And our role here and where I was in practice as being the first to call attention to the FDA that there was something wrong with this drug. And then through the course of my 35 years, I'd encountered a lot of physicians and impaired for a variety of reasons, but all is ultimately a consequence of burnout, stress. So they sought relief elsewhere, be it alcohol or drugs or whatever. And I was chief of surgery for many years, and so had to consult physicians and encountered physicians that had been impaired. And frankly, the very good news is that virtually all of them, not all, but almost all, got help and we were able to return to productive medical practices and doing very, very well. This kind of the third element to the narcotics trafficking
Mhm.
became personal to us in that we were seeing the consequences of narcotics in our community, infected heart valves that we operated on over and over again, and the numbers were just becoming absolutely untenable. And the obviously affect mostly of young people, but there are a lot of middle-aged and even elderly people that this affected. And so I kind of wove the story of contaminated drugs
Mhm.
to that of illicit drugs and somehow brought it all together.
I see. So this novel closely mirrors your own experience as a cardiac surgeon. And earlier you said there was a real world occurrence involving contaminated heparin. What inspired you to build your story around like that particular event?
Well, it was a dramatic change. We
Mhm.
administered the drug to patients in the course of heart and lung surgery, open heart surgery, and they had complete collapse of their circulatory system. And we had a very difficult time in resuscitating them. These occurred on three patients simultaneously, myself and a couple of my partners on one morning. We got done with our cases and started saying, boy, I just had something I didn't recognize. And we compared notes, recognized that it was probably related to the drug, and notified the FDA. And unfortunately, I believe it was like 67 patients across the country died as a result of this contamination. And the FDA traced it back to Chinese manufacturers that had unfortunately, seeking more money, had adulterated the heparin, and we faced the consequences.
I can just imagine the impact of that experience on you. So now that explains why you would want to talk about that further in your novel. So another thing that was tackled in the novel was addiction and physician burnout. They play major roles in the novel. How urgent are these issues in today's medical field?
Oh, tremendously so. COVID just exacerbated what was already occurring in that physicians facing increasing stress to be, if you pardon the word, perfect in the eyes of patients, patients' family, insurance companies. So nobody's perfect, and the failure of perfection in some people, unfortunately, leads to unfortunate choices and consequences. And they turn to something to relieve their stress, to minimize the anxiety that associated with that stress. And alcohol being perhaps the most common, but certainly not the only thing that the physicians and healthcare practitioners in total, not just physicians, turn to and unfortunately suffer those consequences.
I see. So also in your book, Dr. Hummel, several characters they walk a fine line between right and wrong. So what interested you about exploring moral ambiguity through these roles?
Well, I think perhaps a little of that comes with age. Uh, you what seems black and white in my 20s, I realized was a lot of gray in my 60s and 70s. So I think that telling that story and trying to make the human consequences and the human interaction with dilemmas, uh, a story that we all relate to. We may not understand it ourselves, but we certainly can relate in some level to the choices people make and the consequences that they suffer.
I agree with that. Your perspective about different things would really change as you advance further in life. I like what you said about that. So, how do you think the medical community can better protect itself, like, and also its patients as well, from systemic vulnerabilities like the ones depicted in the book?
Well, I think first of all, recognition that stress is a real issue and burnout is a real phenomenon among healthcare workers. The recognition and no longer putting it in the closet, so to speak. It's out in the open. There's a lot of resources available to healthcare workers. When I first retired, in addition to writing, I became an executive coach, certified in positive psychology coaching. And most of my coaching centered around young medical graduates, residents, and their staff. And ultimately, I found most of the issues related to stress,
Mhm.
stress in the young residents and stress in the program directors. And so trying to make them aware of what they're facing, how they're feeling, and what's available to them, and give them some tools to manage stress other than turning to alcohol or drugs or whatever.
I see. It's a very demanding job. So, we can expect that kind of stress that would come along with it. So I would like to talk about trauma this time because in your book, the characters would each respond differently to trauma. That's what I've noticed. Both trauma that comes professionally and personally as well. What did you want to say about resilience in the story?
Well, I think the capacity for humans to withstand trauma that they don't may not recognize, or if they do recognize it, may not believe that they have the capacity to get past, is innate to all of us. We all fear pain. We fear the consequences of pain. But within each of us, I truly believe we have a store of innate skill sets that, if we call upon them, we can really overcome most everything. And I don't want to speak too much to spirituality, but I think there's something not necessarily religious, but there's spiritual strength within each of us. And if you want to recognize that in yourself and are given maybe some tools to look towards that, whether it's being out in nature, kind of recharging your batteries that way, or uh, exercise or meditation. I mean, there's a lot of ways to address stress and trauma, and those are things. Now, if you speak of harsh physical trauma from a car accident or a gunshot wound or whatever, that's a different skill set. But ultimately, the belief in your healing ability and remaining positive goes a long way towards ultimately achieving good health again.
Okay, so Dr. Hummel, I have to ask this. Out of all the characters in the book, um, which character can you relate to the most? Since you said that this book is, part fiction and part real. So is there a specific character
Well,
that you relate to, or a combination perhaps of one or two characters?
I'd like to believe I was the protagonist, the one that Ben that leads everybody else through their troubles. Um, but I certainly have been exposed to all forms of the other characters, all iterations, if you will. And so I think that impacted how I wrote about them and how I created them. Those characters are certainly not a reflection of any one person or any, but they're all a composite of people and instances and difficulties that people I'd encountered had faced.
I see. So a little bit of you in the characters.
Yeah, I think so. I think of anybody that writes, truly writes, has to have
Mhm.
some connection to the subject.
I
So I think all writers, and I put my name as a writer very loosely because I wrote a book, not because I'm good at it. But I think you have to have some relationship with the characters you write, and in order to make them believable, or at least in order to capture the essence of what they are. So
Right. And for the readers to relate to them as well, right?
absolutely, yes.
So, Dr. Hummel, let's talk about your experience in writing the novel since you started to talk about that already. How long did it take you to finish this book? And what were some of the highs and lows that you experienced while you were working on this book?
Well, to answer the last question first, there was really no low. I found writing to be that just completely gratifying to me. And to
Mm,
sit down and I would start in the morning, I would get up and maybe exercise or something, but I'd start writing and then I would suddenly realize it's 5 or 6 hours later and I wasn't hungry. I was perfectly satisfied with how
mm,
my day was. And I guess that, we would term that the flow state, or that we can get into as a human.
mhm,
So I was in that. It probably took 6 months, but maybe a little less. But I just found if I wasn't writing, I didn't feel like I had completed my day properly. So it wasn't
mhm,
always 6 hours. Sometimes it was just an hour. And
mhm,
I found the perhaps the most gratifying part of it being when I could describe something that was pretty commonplace to most people, but found words or able to make it seem different or be seen from a different perspective than you might see an everyday object. And I guess if I ultimately write another book, or if that's the best I ever do, then it was fun. It was a joy to try and create that.
I can understand. It must have been a great escape from everyday life to be lost
Absolutely.
in your writing and all that. So,
Yes.
as a surgeon, can you say that your experience as a surgeon influenced your storytelling style?
Oh,
Like, is there a
yes,
connection
absolutely.
in any way?
Yeah. Both a connection and, as I said, I wrote the first book right after I was literally I was operating full speed one day and realized over the next few days I was losing my eyesight, so I had to quit immediately.
Mhm.
And so I sat down and started writing. I mean, I had to write. I had to tell my stories before it got out. Well, that was the surgical mentality in me. I had to do something right now, make a decision and just do it. I'm much more uh, ability to contemplate a next step now. I'm much more purposeful. I was purposeful in surgery, but I always knew what the next step was. I knew if there was going to be a complication, I knew how I was going to handle it. Writing was a different exercise, and it taught me patience, perhaps more patience than I had before.
More patience that when you were in the operating room, would you
Yes,
say?
no question. Yes.
I see. Did you encounter some surprises while you were writing this novel? It can be something you discovered about yourself, perhaps, while you were working on the book,
Um,
aside from the
I think
patience.
Right. I think I discovered just the joy in putting ideas and thoughts down. Most days I didn't know where the story was going to go next. I would just sit down and write. Um, and so that was kind of a new discovery every day. Um, I didn't have a plot outline. I didn't have the end point. I'd written for a long time. I said, boy, I got to end this now. How am I going to end this story? So I think that was the exciting part of it, is that just being able to take it where I wanted it to go and create something that was on a blank page that hadn't existed.
Okay, so let's look at the other side this time. Earlier, I asked if your experience as a surgeon somehow influenced your storytelling style. This time, I'm going to ask if writing this novel has affected your view of your profession or perhaps past experiences you've had.
No question. Allowed me to look at my professional life in perhaps a little more forgiving way. I was pretty harsh on myself as a surgeon. And in fact, my first book was I tried to talk about narcissism, but and if you're a narcissist, what do? You write a book about yourself. So this changes the way I look at myself now, having completed this story and this creating characters out of ideas. Just, I think it gives me a deeper appreciation for what I was as a professional surgeon, as operating on somebody's heart every day, uh, versus somebody who can now sit down and be perfectly happy, uh, filling a blank page with words and try to find those unique sentences that somebody will remember. And maybe that's the biggest compliment people say that have read the book and go, "Oh, when's the next one? Or are they going to make this a movie? This should be a movie."
Right.
Or, it's very gratifying to have somebody feel like they related to what you have put down.
It's a different kind of fulfillment, right?
Absolutely, yes. The patients
So,
were, by and large, were very grateful for what I did, but this
mhm,
is a different kind of gratitude. So
mhm.
I like it.
That must have felt amazing. Do you have an advice to someone who's just working on their first book?
I think enjoy the process, perhaps. Don't get hung up on, the absolute next word or the next page or where the next moment should be.
Mhm.
Just just go through the joy of creating. And if you have to go back and alter it, there's no harm in that. In fact, you will. But I think it's allowing yourself freedom as you write. Be kind to yourself and just let yourself go. That would be my advice.
Very wise words from you, Dr. Hummel. What conversation are you hoping that your book Toxic Intent will spark in the medical world?
Well, it's sparked a lot. The idea of compromised physicians is always, front and center news. But people now I think, are much more open about saying, hey, it's okay. People can recover. They do recover. And to know that the resources are out there to help them recover. And I think for physicians reading it, it's good to understand the perspective of patients. That's why I was so discouraged when I felt like our community wasn't managing the drug addiction problem well at all. And I was so outraged, I called a big meeting of, concerned people, the sheriff's office, social workers, et cetera. And I found out that one, there was some programs available, but they just weren't coordinated. So by simply raising the issue, you know, we were able to address a problem in the community in a much more organized fashion. So I think just having people read the story and understand that, you know, bad things are out there, bad things happen to people, but we can get by them. We can get by them as individuals, and we can get by them in groups in a community. So I think that's ultimately what I want to come out of the story. Plus, I want it to be an escape. I want people to read it and not be too burdened by today's problems or polarization of our politics or whatever. They can read the story and have fun with it. So,
Just enjoy the ride, as they say, right?
yeah.
So now that you've written the book and it's already out, what are your personal and professional goals for your book this year?
Well, I'd like a lot more people to read it. As I said, people have asked me if it's going to be a movie. I don't have those connections. I'm not sure how that would happen, but just the fact that it is enjoyed by people to me would be a great thing. So if I felt like enough people really were excited about it, and I have an idea for another book, but I don't want to undertake it until my wife says, we'll just write it. Nobody has to read it, but that kind of defeats the purpose for me.
Right. So there's another book on the way.
I think potentially I have some
Hmm.
ideas, and I interviewed some people for something I think would be pretty interesting. So we'll see.
I'm sure everyone's going to wait for that. Will just give us a little background about it. Will it be also medical related, perhaps? So it's
It
close to your
is,
heart.
it's on it. Yeah, it's tangentially related to medicine and the
Mm,
scarcity of some of the things we need to diagnose and treat very bad diseases, and a process that I believe that I'm aware of that could really change that. But again, you have to make the story of there's got to be a criminal element, and somebody's going to take this idea. And so it's real life, but it's frontline real life. So if I write it, it'll probably I don't know, be something people are going to go, oh, I just saw that in the newspaper or something. So
I
it's it's
see.
it's kind of, I don't, not to give away this book too much, but the one that we're talking about, Toxic Intent, uh, talks about fentanyl coming across the Canadian border. Well, I
Mhm.
felt like the politicians must have read that because they started talking about it right after my book was published. So I don't know if they read it or not, but it was a funny coincidence.
That's exciting. I'm sure everyone will be waiting for this new book. Before we wrap up, Dr. Hummel, is there a final message or takeaway that you'd like to leave with our viewers and listeners? Something that you hope will stay with them after they read your book, Toxic Intent?
I would hope readers look at their physicians with perhaps a kinder light. We all love our doctor until we think he's made a mistake. Be compassionate with your caregivers, nurses and doctors. I don't mean just doctors, and appreciate all that they do for them. And then, I hope people do pick up a book, whether this book or another book, and read and enjoy enjoy the thoughts and the imaginations of others that can make your day a little bit brighter.
Thank you for that, Dr. Hummel. Please invite everyone to visit your website or follow you on social media, and of course, get a copy of your book.
All right. Well, you can get the book through Barnes and Noble or Amazon or
Mhm.
through Ex Libris, the publisher.
Mhm.
You can go to my website, brianhummelmd.com, and you can order it there as well. So there are a couple links on there that may help people.
And social media? Perhaps they want to get in touch with you?
I have to be very I'm on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
That's the extent of my social media. I'm not a Facebook person, so I I probably should be, but I just haven't done that.
But that's okay. I'm sure they'll know where to find you. So LinkedIn
Yes.
for Dr. Brian Hummel. Thank you so much, Dr. Brian Hummel, for joining us today and sharing the story behind Toxic Intent, telling us more about how this book came about. If the suspense and the intriguing mix of fact and fiction caught your attention, you don't want to miss reading the book. It's available in paperback, hardback, and ebook formats at Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and of course, Ex Libris online bookstore and other resellers. Thank you to all our viewers and listeners. Join us again for the next episode of the Author Roundup.